business, and I've got one too. You can't mind your business. What's the matter with you?
Welcome back to another episode of the Brand Shorthand Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Vandergrift, and with me today is our strategy superstar, Lorraine Kessler. Thing one, welcome back to the studio. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has been. It's fun being on the paddleboard.
I bet.
Yeah,
Well, between my trip to Italy and your travels,
Yep,
we've had to miss a few weeks.
that's
What's
right.
exciting in your life?
Just being able to stand on the paddleboard. How about your life? You had a much more interesting trip.
Well, speaking of paddleboards, it was interesting over in Europe at the few places we went. One of the first days was Poliano a Mare, which is just south of Bari. And right off the cliffs there, tons of people trying to paddleboard. It is the funniest thing to watch them slip slide off that.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
No, it's
Yeah.
probably tourists that thought renting a paddleboard out, there below the cliffs would be fun, but they didn't realize paddleboarding is hard to get the hang of.
Well, and if it's rough at all,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always wicked when you can have the calmest day and then a pontoon goes by.
Yeah.
Speeding or a mastercraft in my case, and all of a sudden you're like, what? So if there's any wind or it's a whole different game.
Oh yeah, and once
And
it
then
gets wet, once you get wet, it's bad news.
And then and every year there's some new toy, right? We had the guy, I forget what they call those things, that had the jet things where he jets out of the water on feet, like on their feet. You hook it to a jet ski, and then I forget what you call that. But he's like at least 30 feet above the water, 20 feet above the water with this power propulsion. Looks like something from a Marvel movie. And then this year there was a guy with a hoverboard who used it both on the land and on the lake.
Wow.
Just like hovered like across. So,
wow, that's pretty cool.
I know. Not something I'm going to try.
Well, we should probably get started with our topic since we haven't met for a few weeks.
Oh, we
Do
have
you
a topic?
know how to do this anymore?
No. We have a topic? I thought this was it.
Well, I saw an article recently, and it was kind of fitting because we just celebrated our 50th year last year, and we're still independent, as we like to say. And the article dubbed this year, 2025, as the year of independent ad agencies.
Oh, finally.
So I thought it might be interesting to discuss a little bit about that and what the value of being independent means. We actually have a client that we know that there's value in them being independent. I think you know who I'm talking about. And it's kind of inside baseball discussion, but there's value in being independent. So just for context, I want to give everyone context on where Innis Maggiore fits into the spectrum of ad agencies. And this was at last measure. So we have some updated stats that I'll bring in near the end, but we're in the top 3% of agencies in the nation. Okay.
Wow.
Now, how do we get there? Well, there's about 16,000 total agencies or so, plus or minus maybe 1,000. And we were slotted in around 450. And so that puts us in the top 3% of agencies. And they do that based on total staff and total revenue. And we've been independent from the beginning. Chuck Innis and Dick Maggiore founded the agency in 1974. So we're 51 years young and still independent. So beyond that tenure, why are we so proud to remain independent? Well, that's what our topic's going to be today. So to kick off the discussion, I'll give a little bit of an overview of the article that named 2025 as the year of the independent ad agency and some of the key points to it. So number one, big ad agencies are dominating. They have billions and billions of dollars in revenue. They have big clients and they have big prestige. But even more so is they're not just big, they're getting bigger. So they've been merging or acquiring in 2024 alone, 13 major marketing communication agencies, what we call big agencies, made 52 acquisitions.
Wow.
Okay. So I'm not sure how that works out perfectly in math for each one of them, but that means for each of the 13 agencies, they each acquired 4 on average, right?
Yes.
So that's pretty major. I can't even imagine being the COO that has to integrate all those agencies and the cultures and everything else that comes along with it. So the second thing this article brought to mind was these bigger ad agencies are focused on growth.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller creative agencies are measuring wins based on clients' success. Now, I don't know why you would pick growth over client success, but it seems pretty obvious to me who wins in that equation.
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened is the smaller agencies are able to use new technology to build and monitor and optimize campaigns. And so a lot of them have the same capability as these bigger players. So there's not necessarily a distinct advantage in being bigger
Right.
versus being the size we are. We would be considered a medium-sized agency. They mentioned a study also that revealed 91% of the brands had moved at least some of their digital marketing operations in-house. So what that's saying is they want 24/7 access to the campaign analytics and saving on other people like these big agencies that charge big bucks just to save on the advertising spend. Imagine putting more toward media instead of spending on big agencies. So the overall kind of tenor of the article was that these big agencies have lost trust with their clients. And that's where these independent agencies have been able to step in with their technological advancements, with their focus on clients' successes, with their agility, their nimbleness, you name it, that they have an advantage over them. So I don't know if you were able to look through that article, but let me ask you more generic questions in case you haven't. We are seeing these big agencies, all they care about is acquisition, growth. Talk a little bit, based on your perspective, why remaining an independent agency matters today and why it should matter to our clients.
Well, you said it, and from a positioning standpoint, one of the questions you always ask is where to play, right? Where to play to win. And the independent agencies are able to play in the field that, you said it, that these big agencies ignore and don't want to play.
Mm-hmm.
They want big clients, the bigger the better. They're big, they want to get bigger. It's all about big, big, big. And 95% of companies in America are small.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if you say 50 employees or less, and startups. Not every startup is going to have Jeff Bezos, you know, chutzpah, as he just
50
showed off.
million to blow on a wedding in Venice? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Oh my God. So, you know, so there's a huge, vast market for clients who need more personal service, more customized services, more agility, more care, like more relationship building, that they really trust the people they're working with. So, and that hasn't changed since I've been, you know, I started in the business in 1981, around the same time as Dick, and it really hasn't changed. And so I'll quote Al Reese on this: size is not the determinant of success. Focus is. So they're focused on big. They're not going to handle the little guy. And we're focused on everything else that's been left on the table. And we get to choose what we work on in terms of, you know, who's a great client or can be a good client or will be a good client in the future versus someone who's really not worth the risk. So I think that's why independent agencies will always find a place to be. Because the desperate need to grow, and I've heard you say that about these big agencies, it can actually be harmful to a business, particularly if it leads to unfocus. And the bigger these agencies get, right? It's like a freight liner. You can't turn a freight liner fast, right? If you see an obstacle ahead, that freight liner is going to need miles to make the turn. But we're like in little high performance speedboats, and we're able to, turn on a dime. So the bigger they get, the harder it is to manage on one hand and bring all those pieces together and have consistency, I think. And then they become more generalist, right? And the generalist is always, well, almost always, I shouldn't use globals, but almost always vulnerable to a focus specialist. So you're going to go to a big agency where you're the little guy or the medium guy, and all you really need is a discrete package of digital and SEO. Probably not, right? You're going to go to a specialist in digital and SEO. And that's kind of how the world works.
Yeah, it's interesting because to your point, I'll get new business calls in here and it'll be a couple person firm or 10 person firm, and they'll go, I have to ask you before we even talk, will you work with us? And the answer is always, yeah, we work for one person companies up to Microsoft, Disney, Bank of America.
Right.
We work with clients in China and Europe and Latin America and Canada. We've had clients all over the globe, but we can also work for a one person company. And it's not the size of the company as much as it's the size of the marketing budget.
Right.
You tell me you have $5 to spend, then I'm going to say just don't even spend the $5. Go get a Starbucks.
Right.
But if you have sufficient means to invest in your brand, then yeah, we certainly can talk.
Yeah. We're in a perfect. I mean, they sometimes say being in the middle is bad, but I think it's great when the middle is filled with a large volume potential customers who value a lot or care a lot about what you do uniquely for them. And that's make them feel special, have the services they need, have a philosophy, as we do, positioning, that assures them that when we handle their marketing, there's integrity behind it, and they're going to be saying the right thing to the right audiences at the right time. It's a slam dunk. It's up to us to have people either say no to us or we politely just decline, because there's just a great audience for what we do.
Right.
And most independent agencies.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a few of the other benefits. This is, I guess, just a random list, but you could speak to each of these items independently, pun intended. We're based in Canton, Ohio, so we're going to have strong local and regional knowledge. So if your market is in Canton or Canton, Akron, Cleveland, or Northeast Ohio, or the Midwest, we have that knowledge about how consumers and business buyers operate in this market. And that's not always the case when large holding companies or ad networks come in, because they're operating maybe from the coasts, right?
Yeah.
And we know an agency in New York or LA cannot even comprehend the culture of Canton, Ohio, or Cleveland, Ohio, or the Midwest. So maybe speak to the idea of having resident geographical knowledge.
Well, of course, that gives you a leg up. That's an advantage. It can also be a liability. It's an advantage for all the reasons you said. There's a culture that goes along with where you live. There's a lot of these kind of under the current feelings and emotions, and kind of just knowing how the people in the communities think. And they do think differently about different things. But it also can be a limitation in that if you go to another market, you have an opportunity. They'll be, well, you don't know our market if they're geographically bound. But, I found that if you take culture as a broader thing, right, it doesn't just apply to geography. It also applies to just some key areas or industries that we have experience in. we were able to work with the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is very distinct culture, very Southern in its origin, very doctrinally strong in its beliefs, in its Christian beliefs, different than other churches or other organizations. And so we were able to mesh with that because culturally we have people who really fit with that. And we're true Northerners. As I used to kid them, well, I'm Southerner too. And they would say, how are you possibly Southern? I said, I'm from South Jersey. It's all relative.
Yeah, it
New
is.
Jersey, I'm a Southerner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, what you have to find to do that can be an advantage, but you don't want to just rest on that. You want to be
Right.
able to build kind of the skill set and also the wherewithal, kind of a worldliness. I think the fact that you world travel, for example, and you speak fluent German, and that you're interested in world things. And we have many others who have a broader interest. I think that's really important for agency people to tie into different cultures and different understandings.
Yeah. Another one that we list usually, and I can see this going both ways, of course, because larger agencies would argue otherwise, but I think it goes to your Freightliner comment, and that's greater innovation and creativity. Now, let me explain that, because innovation in our world means adopting new technologies very quickly.
Right.
So I would say we are set up because of our ability to say, oh, there's a new technology, go investigate it and learn it, without having to get all this red tape involved that a larger agency would say, okay, who's going to be the stakeholder? Who's going to be the owner of the project? And they get into this process of trying to learn something. And if they go down the wrong road, they're also not able to adapt quickly.
Right.
So by innovation, I'm speaking to that. And then also on the creativity side, we kind of feel with positioning that we can be as creative as we need to be. But as an independent agency, limiting it to that, our creativity is not, it's not restricted by what I would call the large agency norms, right?
Yeah.
Which to me is winning awards, making sure the account buys more, pays more, whatever. Whereas when we have the focus on our client success, the creativity now is targeted in the right way, I think, is the way I want to say it. What's your comment on that?
Well, your creativity is in service to the right strategy.
Yeah.
I would always say that it plays a servant role, not a master role, although it can lead the strategy to great heights by how it's done. So I mean that in the most humble way. I think what happens is the bigger an organization, I don't care if you're talking about agencies or you're talking about retail, like when I worked with Sears, the bigger the agency, the bigger the business, the more bureaucracy, the more layers. What happens is innovation is stymied. There's a homeostasis that happens. And the reason it happens is that mid-level managers and below feel like they have no voice. They don't have a channel to influence and to whisper in the ear of the CEO or whoever the CIO, whoever the powers that be. They don't have a channel at all. And they're often managed by people who are competitive with them, who want to keep their job at their level and keep you at your level. And they're not motivated to really think outside the day and the job that they have. And there's also less ownership of the business in terms of whether it does well or not. They have a less direct influence or feeling connection to the success. If it's that big, you're like, hey, I didn't do much this week and no one figured it out, right? So I still got my paycheck. There's a homeostasis that takes place, and that's deadly to innovation because you really are not hearing from those who might be closer to the customer, closer to the market, closer even to the technology about what's changing and what we need to do. The companies some of these big companies have decided because of that, well, we're not going to DIY it. We'll buy it. We'll keep an eye out and we'll go buy a company and then cobble them in because they have this skill set, let's say in SEO or digital or whatever. And we'll bring them in under, and what happens is you immediately neutralize that entity. The management just, the bureaucratic way of management is the culture, and it can have the same suppressing effect on those partners that you brought in. So they're no longer independent thinkers. So I think, like, they need big money, big budget, and they're not going to experiment with much else. And our people know, in a way, that when they create something or a protocol or a procedure, that's the right way to do SEO or to do whatever we do technologically, which is vast, and you know more about that than I, that it has a direct line to whether we're successful for clients and our bottom line and their job. So there's just something about that that's more direct and more meaningful.
Yeah, another one is, an independent agency can be or develop stronger, more personal relationships. And I think we're kind of special in that way. I don't know if this is true of all independent agencies, but we have, clients that have been around for almost the life of the agency. One that's, I think, 45 years this year. Another one, which is one of our largest, going on 30 years. And what's interesting about that is that's an agency client relationship. So there's a body of knowledge. But added to that, which I think is another level, is the tenure of a lot of our associates. Over 50% of our staff has been here 10 years or longer. And I think 1/3 is 20 years or longer.
Wow.
And so a couple of our account people have been here long enough that they've held that relationship the entire time they've been here.
Yep.
So you imagine knowing an account that well. What's funny is we know more sometimes than the client contacts because the contacts keep switching out
Yeah.
at the client. But our account people and some of our creative staff know that account so well. That, I think, brings value to it. One of the comments we get all the time, and one of the major reasons for switching, is, hey, just calling you up because we're on our third client team in the last year.
Yep.
And we're just tired of constantly switching out. And before they talk about anything else, they want to know, how long have your people been there? Like, what's your average client relationship length? How long have they been working? We have such a wonderful story to tell. And I think people that love independent agencies and what we would call small business, they stick around for that long because we take care of our own, right? You're not a number at Innis Maggiore. You're a person. You're a valuable staff person, and you're part of the family of Innis Maggiore. Well, that translates into great client relationships and knowing industries and clients, again, far better than sometimes the new client contact might know at the company that we're working with.
And I like to qualify what it means to be a great relationship agency, because I led client services at Innis Maggiore for 20 years. It's not about beers after work, playing pool, having a lot of fun, going out on dates, and, schmoozing and playing golf. We've never been a golf agency, thank heavens.
Even though you and I both love golf.
Right. And, hey, there was a time, with my 12 handicap, and then became a 6. I couldn't even step on the course because of the women weren't allowed. So and I used to have to send my clients in my other agency with the owners. It was really annoying. But that's not the kind of relationship we've built at Innis Maggiore. The relationship is, we really passionately, we respect you as a person, whoever the contact is. That's number one. We respect what your role is, and that helps you respect our role. We respect the fact that our job is to help you improve and to achieve whatever business goals you want to achieve. And so we're focused on building the right relationship by accomplishment, by achieving what needs to be achieved time and again. And when we're not, we're honest about, sit down and have kind of truth telling about what we think went right, what we think didn't go right. And then we're obligated to know the industry and to keep fresh on it. And I always felt like one of the jobs that we've done as a client service team is we've kind of managed to work for the client. We kind of are the repository of everything that's been done for that client from beginning to end. So when contacts change, we're there, we're the vault. We can say, this is what happened in this year. These were the decisions that were made. This is why they were made. This is when we changed. Here we are. And we can do that for the next contact while we keep that beautiful record of integrity as to how we got to where we got and where we want to go and why. So we really help manage the client now.
Yeah. Earlier, I had suggested 16,000 total agencies. So I'm going to go to an updated stat. Supposedly, this one comes from Statista, I think is how you say it. And they just published a report in June that shows the number of ad agencies in the United States from 2007 to 2022. And as of 2022, there were about 15,000 advertising agencies. And that's the highest number between 2007 and 22. So whether there's 15 or 16,000, that's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And it's interesting looking at this number because the average size, now average, not the median, but the average is 15 employees. If you were to knock out the top 250 agencies, it goes down to under 10 employees.
That's insane.
On average.
Yeah.
So that indicates most of these firms are freelancers or very boutique firms. You know, they're specialists, as you said. They might be web shops or PR shops or social media shops.
Or design shops, just design.
A design shop, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I found another article that showed the top 250 agency rankings for 2025 based on revenue numbers. And Innis Maggiore is just outside of that top 250. So we might be closer to 300 than we are to 500. I mentioned before, our old data was at 454, I think. So there aren't a lot of large independent agencies. And once you get to our range, even, to me, it was interesting to see there aren't a lot of medium independent agencies either. And we have 32 associates, which means we have a lot of specialties in-house, specialists with specialties. So you know our history as well as anyone and how we've approached the market. If you were consulting with another agency, okay, that was independent, just starting up, what would you tell them on how to stand out among this crowd of 15,000 plus agencies?
Well, I peel back the onion in the pages of history. The greatest agencies were led by thought leaders. So I think thought leadership is absolutely needed. Who's the thought leaders in your firm? And how do you define that thought leadership? And they have a clear, distinctive philosophy. I mean, Ogilvy was all about image and impression. Birnbach was all about the big idea. Rosser Reeves gave us the USP. Trout and Reeves, positioning. Claude Hopkins, scientific advertising. So they had an approach and a thought and a way that they looked at the business that helped your business succeed. And for us, it's positioning 21st century style, right? I think it's positioning that's radical. It radically affects every message you put out, regardless of the media format. And it's radical differentiation that also goes deep, deep, deep to become the operating philosophy for the whole, or operating theory, whatever you want to call it, for the entire business. If you're going to be about safe auto, safe whatever, safe driving, then it affects everything you do, from engineering to customer service to the parts, the raw materials you buy, procurement to your marketing, everything. And that is radical differentiation. So it goes much deeper than the USP, which Rosser Reeves is talking mainly about the message, a product having a specific selling message. It goes even deeper than, I think, Trout and Reese's positioning, which is still a little broader, but still about basically the service or product and what the company promises. But it goes even deeper to become the absolute holy grail that defines the operating system of the entire company. And it informs all 4 P's of marketing, right? Like I said, product, what it is, what it could be, how it's made, where it's sold, the promotion, the advertising, the tone, where you're seeing the PR, your social, price, whether you're going to be luxury, premium, value, or low cost, and the place, where you play to win, what markets or marketplaces, what regions, what channels. These are all informed by radical position. So that's our philosophy. I would, as a buyer, that would be my first question for an ad agency before I even ask what's your long tenure of associates and client relationships. I think that's all great, and those are great questions to ask. But my first thing would be, what differentiates you in terms of your theory of marketing, and how are you holding yourself to that? I don't think many agencies